Sandra had imagined her wedding day since she was a child. Not in extravagant detail, but in feeling. She imagined safety. She imagined standing beside someone who saw her fully and chose her anyway. She imagined that walking down the aisle would feel like arriving home. Instead, the morning of her wedding began with a tightness in her chest. That felt less like excitement and more like dread. The hotel room was filled with soft music, makeup brushes, laughter from bridesmaids, and the scent of expensive perfume. Everyone kept saying she looked beautiful. Everyone kept saying she was lucky. Sandra stared at herself in the mirror and felt like she was watching someone else prepare to ruin her life. Her fiancé, Eric, had always been charming in public. He knew how to smile at the right moments, how to hold her waist gently when others were watching. But behind closed doors, he was different. Critical, controlling, quick to anger. He never hit her. And for a long time she used that as proof that things were not truly bad. But emotional cruelty leaves bruises that do not show in photographs. He monitored who she spoke to, questioned her clothing choices, criticized her weight, and reminded her constantly that she was too sensitive. Whenever she cried, he would sigh heavily and say she was exhausting. Over time, Sandra began shrinking herself to fit inside his comfort. 3 weeks before the wedding, she found messages on his laptop. At first she thought she misunderstood them. The tone was intimate. The conversation spanned months. He had been speaking to another woman, meeting her for drinks, confiding in her about doubts, joking about Sandra's anxiety. One message pierced deeper than the rest. Sometimes I think she needs me more than I need her. Sandra felt the ground shift beneath her. When she confronted him, he did not deny it. He told her it was harmless. He said she was overreacting. He said calling off the wedding would humiliate both their families. He asked her if she really wanted to throw away everything over a few texts. Fear won over clarity. Invitations had been sent. Deposits had been paid. Her parents had taken loans to contribute. She imagined the shame, the whispers, the disappointment in her mother's eyes. Eric apologized in a way that sounded rehearsed, promising to cut contact. He said weddings were stressful and he had just needed distraction. Sandra wanted to believe him, because believing him was easier than dismantling the life she had been building for years. On the morning of the ceremony, her mother hugged her and cried softly, whispering, "You did it. You found someone who will take care of you." The words felt like a knife. Sandra did not feel taken care of. She felt trapped. Her father held her hands and told her she deserved happiness. She almost confessed everything in that moment. She almost said she was scared. But the hallway outside buzzed with activity. The photographer adjusted lighting. The wedding planner knocked to check timing. There was no space for doubt. As she stood at the church entrance, veil covering her face, she could hear the guests settling into pews. The music began. The doors opened. Sandra took her first step down the aisle and felt like she was walking towards something irreversible. Eric stood at the altar, smiling confidently. To everyone else, he looked proud and loving. To Sandra, he looked like someone she no longer recognized. Halfway down the aisle, her hands began trembling. Her breathing grew shallow. She felt lightheaded. She searched his face for reassurance, and instead saw impatience flicker across his expression, as if her hesitation inconvenienced him. During the vows, Eric squeezed her hands tightly, almost painfully, whenever she paused too long. When she spoke her promises, her voice cracked. She felt as though she was lying to herself more than to anyone else. When the officiant pronounced them married, applause filled the room. Sandra forced a smile. Photographs captured a radiant bride. No camera recorded the hollow ache in her chest. The reception blurred into noise. Guests congratulated her. Friends toasted their love. Eric whispered sharply in her ear when she lingered too long, speaking to an old male classmate. "Don't embarrass me," he muttered. Sandra felt something inside her fracture. She excused herself and locked herself in the restroom. She stared at her reflection, mascara slightly smudged, lips trembling. The white dress that once symbolized hope now felt like a costume. In that small bathroom, away from applause and expectation, The weight of everything collapsed onto her. She thought about the messages. She thought about the way he minimized her pain. She thought about a lifetime of explaining herself, defending her feelings, questioning her instincts. The realization came slowly and then all at once. She had just legally bound herself to someone who did not respect her. The future stretched before her like a narrow tunnel with no light. Her thoughts turned dark. She wondered if disappearing would be easier than enduring. She imagined the silence that would follow. She imagined relief from the constant anxiety. For a terrifying moment, the idea of ending. Her life felt like control, like the only decision that would truly be hers that day. She sat on the cold tile floor, wedding dress pooling around her, and cried in a way she had never cried before. A knock interrupted her spiral. It was her younger sister, Mia, who had noticed her absence. "Sandra, are you okay?" The concern in her sister's voice cut through the fog. Sandra opened the door. One look at her tear-streaked face and Mia understood something was terribly wrong. In broken sentences, Sandra confessed everything. The messages, the doubts, the fear. She admitted she did not feel safe. She admitted she felt trapped. Mia did not scold her. She did not mention money or reputation. She simply held her and said, "You can still choose yourself." Those words pierced deeper than any insult Eric had ever delivered. Sandra realized that while she could not undo the ceremony that had just happened, she could still decide what came next. That night, after the guests left and the hotel suite grew quiet, Eric began criticizing her again for being dramatic at the reception. Something inside her shifted from fear to clarity. She looked at him and saw not a partner, but a pattern she refused to repeat. She told him she wanted an annulment. He laughed at first. Then he grew angry. But for the first time, his anger did not shrink her. The days that followed were messy and humiliating. There were calls to lawyers, awkward conversations with family, gossip among friends. But Sandra remained firm. She sought therapy. She unpacked why she had ignored her instincts. She confronted the parts of herself that equated endurance with love. She often thinks back to that bathroom floor. She remembers how close she came to making a permanent decision over a temporary prison. She remembers how heavy the dress felt. She remembers the moment her sister said she could still choose herself. That moment saved her life. Sandra's wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Instead, it became the day she faced the darkest thoughts she had ever known. But it was also the day she learned that survival sometimes means walking away from applause, from expectations, from everything that looks perfect on the outside. It was the day she understood that love without respect is not love at all. And it was the day she chose to live, not for a man, not for a ceremony, but for herself.